today we're going to be creating a stocking for pets. Mine happen to be for my dogs, but this would work great for a cat lover as well. And you can choose many different patterns of the felt, or felt and the fleece for that matter. I just happen to choose this one. This one we've had for many years, and we're going to remake one a little more colorful today. Let's get started. The first thing I like to do is take a piece of paper and kind of freehand the shape that I want my stocking to be. And you're going to want to freehand that a little larger than what you want your end product to look like, because we're going to be sewing it. So we're going to lose anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 inch, depending on how big of a seam allowance you'd like to have. So I'm going to go ahead and take this pattern that I hand sketched. Going to take my felt, or fleece, excuse me, and I'm going to leave it doubled up. Now if you have a pattern on your fleece, you're going to want to make sure the way that you sit your pattern down that this will end up going the right direction. This one that I had done in the past, the paw prints went in most every direction, so it didn't really matter. However, this one, all of our paw prints are going the same direction. So, following this pattern here, I'm going to want to make sure that my paw pads, or fingers if you will, are facing down, so that these paws are facing upward, so when the final product happens, our paws will be facing up. You could do it the other direction, but to me, I feel like this would look improper in some way. So again, I just left this doubled up as it came. Make sure your bottom two cuts here are lined up. This fleece doesn't have a real distinct inside or outside, so I don't have to worry about that necessarily. And then I'm going to go ahead and lay my pattern over. Now I'm going to use just a general safety pin to hold my pattern on, because I'm truly going to just freehand this all the way around. Okay, now with our pattern in place, I just chose 3 random spots to hold this in the general position. I do want to mention one thing. When you're making your sketch for this, you want to make sure that the individual fingers or toes are not too small, because you're going to have to navigate your sewing machine around these. And if you make it too intricate, you're going to have a hard time getting around with the sewing machine. And then when we turn it inside out, or outside in, I should say, it's going to make it look too bulky, and it's just not going to look right. So keep that in mind when making your sketch. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut around my pattern. Take our excess off to the side here. Just to give you an idea on size, the piece of fleece that I have here is 1/2 yard, and you could probably, let's see, we've already cut 1 out. I bet we could get at least another 2. Yep, another 2 out of it. So 1/2 yard is going to give you enough for about 3 mittens. I ended up buying a 1/2 yard because of the pattern that was on mine. If you have a solid piece, or maybe a pattern that doesn't lend itself to needing to be placed in a certain area, then you wouldn't possibly have to have that entire 1/2 yard of fabric. You could get away with less. So that's another thing to keep in mind. If you're going to need to piece your fabric so that it looks a certain way, you're going to need more. Now I'm just fussy cutting basically, because I free-handed some of those edges, and that's what we've ended up with. Now what I'm going to do is unpin the paper from this, and I'm going to go ahead and just simply stitch around the outside with the right sides together. with my sewing machine, and then I'll be right back with you. All right, now that we have it all sewn together, I'm gonna go ahead and take my scissors, and every probably 1/4 inch or so, I'm around the corners here, I'm gonna make a little snip, and that's gonna help these lay a little more flat and in shape when we flip it inside out. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Go ahead and turn this over. And there we go. And there's our basic shape. So next what we're going to want to do is make our fur edge here, as you can see in our sample. What I'm going to go ahead and do is I got 1/8 of a yard of this. I'm going to go ahead and fold over both edges and just sew them on to themselves basically, and then we'll work on fixing it to our actual paw stocking. So let me go ahead and work on sewing each edge in. You could hand stitch that if you prefer, which actually I might end up doing because it'll be a little easier than the machine. And I'll be right back. Alright, so what I went ahead and did was turned our stocking back inside out. I cut a strip of the faux fur to the length that I would like it. I left about 1/2 inch extra, folded this over so the wrong sides were together, and stitched around the bottom. Then I put the right side of the fur against the wrong side of the stocking. So again, the right side of the fur against the wrong side of the stocking while it's turned inside out, and went ahead and pinned this. Now what I'm going to do is either machine sew or hand stitch the fur to the actual stocking. Again, I'm going to try it on the machine, but it is a little slippery with this fur, so if that doesn't work, I'll go ahead and hand stitch it. So I'm going to go ahead and do this round here, and I'll be right back. Alright, so I went ahead and sewed these together, turned the stocking back so that the right side is out again, and that gives us both right sides out like they should be. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is match up the two ends here and stitch those together so we have one continuous circle. And then I'm also going to tack every so often on here so that the fur piece is also part of the, or is tacked down to the fleece of the stocking. And I'm going to do this by hand, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I went ahead and finished this off. It's hard to see on this, but I met the two sides together, went ahead and stitched them. Then I tacked down just on the two side seams. So you can get your hand in between the fur on the front and back, but on the sides it is tacked down. And here's where my seam is. So I'm going to go ahead and make the opposite side the front of my stocking. Now this is where our felt comes into play. And I'm going to go ahead and trace out on a piece of paper some general shapes to make the paw pads. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So here are my paw pads that I went ahead and just freehanded on a piece of paper and cut out. Now what I'm going to do is take those and go ahead and flip my felt over, and I'm going to take each of these pieces and place them. I marked which side I wanted to be the bottom because they are a slight bit almost like egg shaped. So I'm going to trace around each of these on here, then go ahead and cut those out, and then we'll be able to put them back onto our stocking. Now, one trick I want to pass along for making the biggest pad on their foot is it's basically a heart shape, only not quite as pointy. So that'll help you a little. So let's go ahead and start adhering them on. And there's our finished stocking.